1. For context, I work as a salesman in a wine store. It's not a normal wine and liquor place, it's a curated selection, meaning we pick out all the wine we sell. This is irregular in retail. Most selections are curated by the distributor. As a result, all the employees have to really know their stuff, and we are regularly asked a lot of questions, and need to give detailed and honest answers. Our customer base really likes us, and new customers are either pleasantly surprised by the experience, or endlessly mad we don't carry their name brand thing they like. Damn you, whispering angel. The other day, a couple came into the store at the recommendation of a friend, Asher and Blake. Asher was very excited and was super happy when we had the bottles they had taken pictures of at a party the other day. Blake, however, immediately started making comments like, "Really? That one?" or "That tasted awful, you want that?" Asher was clearly a little upset at this, but I gathered that this was just a normal dynamic in their relationship, as it was brushed off rather quickly. After we put those bottles aside, they tell me they're going to do a garden party since it's warm. Nice sunny day. Light apps and snacks, average spring party. So they ask me to recommend some wine, and I start going through the store and showing them some options. I hit all the big boys, Loire and the new Sauvignon Blancs, Provincial Rosés, Albarinos Toscanas, and New World Pinot Noir for the red drinkers. A good selection for the food they had described. Well, Blake did not think so. Every suggestion I made was met with a counter. I show them a nice floral, unoaked white Burgundy. "I think we should do Chablis, Pinot Noir. Don't you think Pinot is too heavy? Sauvignon Blanc, too sweet. Albarino, too heavy." At this point, I'm at a loss. I'm running out of stuff to give Blake, so I scale up a bit, offer some fuller-bodied wines. Not great pairing to the event or the food, but not destructive. Blake is still not happy. Asher is clearly angry at this point. They've been holding their tongue, but every denial makes their face a darker shade of red until they finally pop. Asher apologizes to me and says they're going to go with my suggestions, and tells Blake that they can pick out a bottle they want, because they clearly are not willing to listen to me. I go through and put their cart together, listen to them argue a bit at the register, and then check Blake out after Asher storms out of the store. Whatever, I'm free of it. Asher is a saint for dealing with Blake. It's done. It was not done. The next morning when I show up, Blake is waiting for me with 3 bottles they picked. Got 3 of the same thing. "The wine is off," Blake says, holding the bottle out like it's some sort of weird bug. I tell him that, yeah, it happens sometimes, I'll check it out. To be clear, it is rare that the wine is actually off. Most of the time, the customer just doesn't like it. It doesn't hurt us, and we want the business, so we always accept exchanges and just agree that it wasn't right. The customer has been right twice that I have seen, and I was one of the 2 customers. Compromised cork. So I open up the store with an impatient Blake standing over me before finally taking the bottle. I kid you not, this thing is like 80 degrees. It is hot. The sun hasn't been out long enough to do this either, so I'm pretty confident they did something to it. Anyway, I pour myself a glass and taste it. Even through the mire of hot booze, I can tell it's good. All of the flavors I expect stand out. It smells fine, no evidence of oxidizing or mildew. Good bottle. Feeling petty, I tell Blake as much, wanting them to admit that they just don't like the wine. Blake turns a bit red and says as much. Good. Let's pick something else out then. "Where are your Super Tuscans?" Blake asks. I light up, because this is the perfect chance to screw with them. We have 2 true ones in the store. One is a very accessible price, pretty standard Sangiovese, Cab Franc, Merlot, Syrah, really nice and medium-bodied. Wouldn't be too bad for the garden party, but still on the heavier end. The other, expensive as hell, Syrah and Cab Franc. It is the inkiest, blackest, heaviest wine you can imagine. I love it, but I think it might kill anyone who drinks it in 80-degree weather. Well, I give Blake the heavy one. Blake, of course, is in love when I tell him about it, Big, bold flavors, heavy, crushes the flavor of whatever you eat with it. Perfect for Blake. They get 3 to replace the bottles they returned, and end up spending an extra $1.30, even with the cost of the refunded wine deducted. Now I know I'm way more sensitive to wine and food than others are, but this was perfect. Even somebody who demolished their palate with years of cigar smoking would be able to tell that wine is awfully paired. I'm happy knowing Blake is going to get some weird looks from their guests, and a tongue lashing from Asher, and Blake is happy with the bottle of grape-based olive oil they now own. Compliance given maliciously. 2. In my 20s, I spent a little over 5 years working for an oil and gas well service company. It was a 15-on, 6-off rotation. The first 4 years was at a small shop roughly 7 hours from home, at which point I transferred to a much busier shop that was only a few hours from home. 5 years seems like peanuts in the working world, but in this particular line of work it was a long time. Decent job security as far as oil field work goes, but the pay was marginal at best, so turnover was high. At 5 years, I was the most experienced hand in our shop. The new shop was definitely busier. The money was way better, and I managed to have my days off matched up with a supervisor whose way of doing things meshed perfectly with me. Everything else about the place? Awful. My breaking point was being denied a day off with 2 days' notice to attend a funeral for a good friend who was lost to some health complications after a car accident. I was generally pretty understanding that in our line of work, it could be difficult to always balance manpower. But the day I requested off passed with 4 other hands sitting around at the shop doing make-work projects to pass the day. Management couldn't be bothered to take a few minutes to see if they could make things work. It was easier just to say no. To that point in my employment there, I had been extremely flexible with helping out during manpower shortages. I had probably worked in excess of 100 days off, and had only ever used 1 sick day. I thought a little reciprocity would have been nice, but I made up my mind. I had fulfilled my obligation to work 1 year at that shop, as to not have to pay back the $4K transfer bonus I'd received, and then it would be time to move on. I was only a few months off that 1-year mark, so I started job shopping immediately, and quickly set my sights on a mine that we regularly did work for, that was close enough to home that I could commute on a daily basis. I made some inquiries with people that I knew were working there, and it seemed right up my alley. Not long after that, I updated my resume and sent it in. A few weeks later, I'm driving back from a job and get a voicemail from HR at the company I applied to. I called back as soon as I had a spare minute, and they were looking to have me come in for an interview 2 days later. My heart sank knowing that was going to be a struggle. I talked with the HR lady, seeing if they had any other dates available, but it was explained to me that they only arrange 1 interview day, since they have enough holes to fill in their crews to justify doing orientation with a group of new hires. She said she could put me as first call for the next round, but didn't know when that would be, and she said it would also be fairly short notice. In the end, I agreed to the interview appointment, not knowing how I was going to make it work. I immediately went to the assistant manager to ask for time off, as he was looking after dispatching duties that week. I told him something important came up at home that I really needed to deal with. Without hesitation, he said, "No, we have a full board this week and we need you here. Whatever it is, we'll have to wait for your days off." My first thought was that I was just going to call in sick and go to the new job interview. The last thing I wanted to do was worry about being fired from a job I no longer want. Then I realized maybe there was another path forward and went to the job board. And there it was, exactly what I needed. A potentially week-long job for the company I was set to interview with, and the job was scheduled to start the next day. And none of the jobs had been assigned to crews yet. I filled my supervisor in with the circumstances and my plan, and he was on board with it. We went to the assistant manager and offered to take that job. He was delighted to have us volunteer, as not many crews care to be away from home for a week, mainly being confined to a rig shack. Day 1 went smoothly, and we were done by early afternoon. I used the supervisor's truck and went home to get some interview-appropriate clothes. Day 2 we were running a bit behind, but we just barely got the job set up, and our tools deployed into the well with enough time for me to grab a quick shower and change of clothes before again taking the supervisor's truck over to the administration building for my interview. Got a call the next week with an offer of a start date 2 weeks out. Starting wage was definitely lower than I was making, but they offered clearly defined progression that would have me easily equaling my current income in year 2 and well exceeding it by year 4. Benefits were better and schedule would give me twice as much time off. Went to give my manager 2 weeks' notice and he asked where I was going and what I'd be making. He was appalled I'd leave for such a low starting wage. He asked what it would take to keep me. I told him when a person takes a pay cut to leave, obviously that ship sailed long ago. 3. Shortly after graduating in 2000, I took a 20% pay cut from my big blue box store assistant manager job to manage a rundown strip mall chain, fancy card and gift store for FCGS store, because I wanted a challenge and wasn't being treated well in the boys club at the Big Blue. You may have heard about the multiple class action lawsuits for crappy pay and discrimination, but that's a story for another day. FCGS owner was a woman and very nice, so I was excited to be treated with more respect. Wound up being salaried on a 50-plus hour a week job. I was yelled at for ordering wrapping paper, gift bags, tissue, because the walls were bare. I was yelled at for an hour-long distance phone call that cost $5 when my friend was having a meltdown over an unplanned pregnancy. I offered to pay, but they wouldn't let me, so they could teach me a lesson. What? At 3 months, they offered me another bigger brand new store because I did such a good job with the one I was running. Things were great there. I worked less hours, customers and staff were happier. A few months into that, they wanted me to take over the second highest profit store in the chain of 12. The catch was I had to do both. No biggie, the store I was currently in ran beautifully with the awesome employees I hired. I asked for a 50% raise and was told I had to prove myself for a month. Friends, I fell for it. After redoing the layout, cleaning top to bottom, actually organizing the storeroom, remember this is peak porcelain statue time, so lots of tiny boxes, and still no raise, they asked me to train this woman right out of college on store operations. She and I became fast friends, and we started hanging out after work. We started talking. She said she was supposed to take over the big store in which I was currently proving myself. The owner never told me this, and didn't tell her I didn't know. I thought she would take over a new location. Remember, I'm running all the operations for 2 high-profit stores and continually increasing sales. She was brand new, no experience. I had 6 years' experience in retail management, her degree was in English, mine was in business marketing. And best of all, she was making $5,000 more than me, and most of any of the managers. Excuse me? Here's a petty part. I saw the error of my ways and devised a plan. I talked to all my employees in both stores, about 15 people, and let them know I was planning on leaving and what the owner had done. You know the kind of people who work at FCGS, kind, supportive, caring? That was too much for them too. 2 weeks later, the new manager and I went to the main office, met with the owner, and turned in our immediate resignations. And the immediate resignations of all staff but 3, single moms who couldn't quit immediately. She was livid. She yelled and cursed while we snickered. Within 3 months, the original store closed. A year after our resignations, the second and third stores closed. That was pretty gratifying. I think my friend and I may have skipped like children out of the office that day. I definitely know we hit the bar and took ourselves out for a nice dinner. Fast forward 25 years later, I'm still friends and co-workers in an entirely different field with one of the 2 main office workers that was there that day. She has given me the full details and repercussions. These stories still fill me with joy and pride. 4. I'm not proud of this, but gosh, it did work. I used to run a very large team at a very well-known entity publishing articles. I managed the writers, the QC, fact-checkers, and the editors. Everyone generally worked really well together. There was one writer, however, who was an unbelievable prima donna. To be very fair, the writer generally did decent work, but could be a sloppy writer, and was also a truly horrible person to everyone, berating and trying to belittle anyone that dared question the writer's work. And even the best writer in the world benefits from a good editor. Someone who's going to read what you actually write. It's really, really hard to check your own writing. You read it as you meant to write it. I spoke to the writer directly numerous times about the appalling behavior. After about the fourth time, I made it clear the team players got priority, bullies got sent back to the line and reported to HR. About 3 days later, the writer submits an article for checking. The initial editor goes back to clarify some things and gets stomped on hard. I go to the editor. I'll take this one. I put it on my desk at the back of the pile. 30 minutes later, I see the writer yelling at the initial editor. "Sorry, Mr. Metro is handling it." Writer takes one step over to my desk, stops, and goes back to their desk. I finish the pile of work, except the writer's piece, timing it to just coincide with a senior management meeting. 2 hours have now gone by before I start on the piece. I sent it back to the writer asking for clarification. I start work on another piece in the interim. Writer resubmits. I finally start on it again, then send it back again, asking for clarification in the next sentence. I work on another piece in the interim. Writer resubmits, and yep, I send it back again, asking for clarification in the next sentence. Of course, I'm CCing the writer's entire team each time. Each time the team gets to see the writer try to explain what they were trying to say. This lasted most of the afternoon, as I went over that piece with a fine-tooth comb, requesting clarification for literally every word in the story, showing in painstaking detail why what they had written didn't work. The writer got the hint, and while the writer was never exactly a sunbeam to work with, we never had to deal with childish blow-ups again. 5. A few years back, I worked as a junior analyst at a mid-sized consulting firm. Our team was known for delivering quality work, often going above and beyond to meet tight deadlines. We had a flexible work culture, and as long as the work got done, no one micromanaged our hours. Our new manager, Karen, not a real name but fitting, came from a corporate background and was obsessed with metrics and control. She introduced a new policy. Every team member had to log their work in 15-minute increments using a new time-tracking software. She claimed it was to optimize productivity, but it felt more like surveillance. We tried to express our concerns, highlighting that the nature of our work didn't always fit neatly into 15-minute blocks. Sometimes we had brainstorming sessions, quick client calls, or impromptu team huddles. But Karen was adamant. If it's not logged, it didn't happen. Fine. I decided to comply maliciously. I began logging every single activity. 9 a.m. to 9:15 a.m., booting up computer after reviewing emails. 9:15 a.m. to 9:30 a.m., responding to emails. 9:30 a.m. to 9:45 a.m., coffee break. 9:45 a.m. to 10 a.m., team stand-up meeting. 10 a.m. to 10:15 a.m., bathroom break. 10:15 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., reading industry articles for professional development, and so on. I included everything, waiting for files to download, software updates, even the time spent logging time. I wasn't the only one. The entire team followed suit. Within a week, Karen was inundated with detailed logs that painted a picture of a team bogged down by administrative tasks. Our actual productivity took a hit because we were so focused on tracking every minute. After 2 weeks, Karen called a team meeting. She looked exhausted. Aww. Okay, maybe we went a bit overboard with the time tracking, she admitted. Let's simplify the process. Victory. We returned to our previous system, focusing on deliverables rather than micromanaging time. Productivity soared, and Karen learned that trust and flexibility often yield better results than rigid control. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 413. And big thanks to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please hit the like button before you go, and if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing. If you would like to support the channel, you can do that by signing up for my Patreon page, which is linked for you in the description. You give me $1 or more a month, and you get all the videos on Monday at once as a thank you. We also have a merchandise store on Teespring linked in the description. Okay. No other bits and bobs, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is there any word you know you're probably pronouncing wrong, but you just do it that way anyway because you're used to it? Like, for example, the local store Lidl is probably pronounced Lidl, at least it is locally by most people, but I've always called it Lidl because I'm a fancy boy. At least it sounds nicer in my mind. I'm not sure what the actual one is, but everyone seems to go for the second option. Let me know what you think in a comment below. Words or names or anything like that you think you might be pronouncing incorrectly. And not like where there can be like multiple pronunciations, like schedule versus schedule. Both are acceptable, that sort of thing. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And I think this was about smells that send you right back to your childhood. This one came from Revenge's Ice Cream 412. And let's see. Today's answer comes from Henry Angala. The smell of early morning rain in a seaside town. I grew up near the coast in my country. Thank you very much for your answer, Henry. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.